of our product. And I was obviously concerned. Then I looked a little deeper, and I saw that not only was it a knockoff of our product, but it violated a number of our trademarks. So someone did not do their homework. And we were able to quickly get it taken down through the Amazon brand registry, which speaks to some of the progress they've made, but I think it speaks also to an underlying problem that you have brought up here.
Very, very good, and I appreciate that. And I think we're seeing so much more of it than, you just happen to be on this panel. We've had people who have experienced this, as we know from the reporting, and I think there's just a lot of it. And my view is that we've got to update our laws, which is part of the work that Senator Durbin, Senator Grassley have been doing. I'm also, of course, concerned about safety when consumers buy products online. Just last week in the Commerce Committee, I questioned SNAP about the heart-wrenching stories of young people in Minnesota who died after taking drugs that were purchased on SNAP. In one case, they didn't know that it was laced with fentanyl. Mr. Dugan, what are some of the harm consumers can experience when they unknowingly purchase unsafe goods online?
Thank you for that question, Senator. There's a lot of harms. I will say that there's virtually no product integrity online, so I would caution buying sensitive products online unless you know that they're safe. We spoke about infant formula. There's another cases that I've worked, unfortunately, involving organized crews that steal millions of dollars in diabetic test strips and sell them and store them at different temperatures, and then wind up counterfeiting the diabetic test strips and then sell them to unsuspecting patients with diabetes across the country. So there's a lot of harm across there. The effectiveness of over-the-counter drugs, they expire, they get less effective. It's really a domino effect on the type of safety hazards that are out there when there's no product integrity.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the fentanyl example is an example of drugs that shouldn't be sold at all on a platform. SNAP has pledged to take these down and do what they can to get in the witnesses' words at the last hearing, drug dealers off their platform. But the truth is, I continue to believe that when you have these new marketplaces with people making tons of money, that they have to start being responsible for taking this stuff down. Ms. Camel, in your experience, when consumers are making purchases online, do they have enough information to decide for themselves whether a product might be unsafe?
No, they don't. Often they are looking just at an image. Sometimes it's a copy of another brand's copyrighted image and what information the seller decides to put on the site. So one cannot tell what they're actually buying until they receive the product, even if it appears genuine at first glance.
Mm-hmm. And whether it's counterfeit PPE on Amazon or advertisements for fake COVID-19 vaccines on Facebook, do you think that online platforms are doing enough to stop this conduct? What else should they be doing?
There were a lot of initiatives around fake PPE and counterfeit COVID-related products, for sure, and I do applaud the marketplaces for looking at that. But across the board, we see counterfeits in almost every industry that we work with, almost every product line that's successful. So I believe more should be done proactively.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate it. And again, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for all your work on this and for being a co-sponsor of our bill, which I think is so timely given what we're talking about here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of you for offering your insights today. We've all seen that e-commerce has revolutionized the marketplace. It's revolutionized the way we live and operate and do business. And it's given a lot of people opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. There are some challenges that have, of course, accompanied this technological revolution and the corresponding social and economic revolution that has occurred with it. As we seek to make the world a better place and the online experience to be better, we've got to be careful because anytime we enact laws, those laws can have consequences. We want to make sure that any laws we enact and codify don't make things worse or don't create one problem while purporting to solve another. And the legislation we're talking about today is something that we ought to scrutinize carefully to make sure that we've got it right. I do have some concerns with it. Mr. Stone, I'd like to start with you, if that's all right. The INFORM Act has a laudable goal, one that I think all of us would share, of cracking down on counterfeit and stolen merchandise sales on the internet. Nobody wants that. Everyone wants to crack down on that, at least everyone in this room. But I wonder how difficult some of the requirements might be for some companies, especially smaller online marketplaces. And by smaller online marketplaces, I mean, to a degree, anything other than the largest among them. Anything smaller than the largest among them could suffer. For example, the bill requires verification of high-volume third-party sellers and requires that within 3 business days.
Right.
And then it also requires continuous annual certification of all sellers. The threshold definition of a high-volume seller is set fairly low. It's triggered once you pass the required sales of between $5,000 and $7,000 annually. It's pretty low. It would take in a lot of people. Do you have any idea? I'm imagining that the combined sellers of your member companies can certainly be numbered in the many thousands, if not millions. Am I on track there roughly?
In the millions, yes.
In the millions. So we're talking about millions and millions of sellers. Now, Amazon might, just might, be able to do this verification with technology. It might be able to do it just fine. I'm not sure. But I doubt all of your members would. And I definitely worry about smaller platforms that might not be able to do this. Could the bill, assuming that I'm right, that some really large online marketplaces, Amazon, for example, might be able to do this, but smaller companies wouldn't, could the bill end up helping a company like Amazon while making it more difficult for smaller businesses to operate and do so in compliance with the law?
Well, Senator, I think your characterization of sellers who use our online marketplaces is accurate. It can be someone, a mom who's working on handmade goods or something that she makes in her basement. And then she would fall to the verification process of having to do it every 3 days. I think what happens in the House bill, which is about 10 days, gives a little bit more time and flexibility. We don't want to have barriers that will limit sellers from being able to get online and sell their goods. The beautiful thing about online marketplaces is that it opens up the door for more sellers, but it also opens up the door for more buyers to see your products.
Right.
So I would say that the 10-day threshold, I think, would be important, and also raising the limit to $20,000. Right now, I think it's like you said, it's $5,000 or $7,000. One of the issues is if you think about someone selling something, if it's $5,000 over 200 sales, that's about $13 a week selling a product. That's not a lot of money.
Which gets to another concern that I've got. I do worry about language in the Inform Act and in the Shop Safe Act that would mandate the public disclosure of the platform's sellers' names and contact information. This worries me for 3 independent reasons. Number one, there are a lot of individuals, moms and dads out there who work from home, or at least partially from home, who operate out of their homes. And if they have to provide their name and their address, that could present some privacy and safety and security issues for them. Some of them might be deterred from engaging in that line of work at all. Number two, it could end up stifling competition by giving larger companies the ability to poach sellers, the sellers who have been affiliated with their smaller competitors. And number three, the sheer regulatory burden associated with this could itself create a natural barrier on entry, a natural restriction on entry, making it harder generally for smaller competitors to compete. Am I right to be concerned about those 3 things?
I think you are. The one concern that I would applaud the chairman and members of the committee who have worked with us and others, particularly in the House side as well as the Senate side, to allow consumers or sellers to be able to report their business information versus their personal information, because that is definitely a barrier. if I'm a single mom creating products out of my basement, I don't want everyone to know where my home address is. So I would definitely say that we need to keep going down that path.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Coons?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, for holding this important hearing. The Ranking Member and I have been co-chairs of the Trademark Caucus for a long time, and have held a number of caucus meetings and hearings over the last decade about the risk that counterfeit goods provide or pose to American consumers. This testimony today is riveting and challenging. It reminds us that as the marketplace for the purchase of goods online has grown, and particularly strongly during the pandemic, that the number of stolen and counterfeit goods that are now being stolen and fenced or produced and sold to American consumers has taken off dramatically. We've heard about unsafe goods, whether they're cell phone batteries or bike helmets or spoiled baby formula or counterfeit drugs that have harmed Americans. They also ruin the trust built between brand owners and consumers, as Crazy Aaron, not so crazy Aaron, pretty wise and capable Aaron has demonstrated to us today. I think we need to take stronger steps to address the online sale of these goods before they reach consumers' hands. There's some studies that suggest as much as a quarter of all Americans who've purchased goods online have unknowingly purchased a counterfeit good. That's why I'm proud, along with my colleague, Senator Tillis, to have introduced the Shop Safe Act. I was pleased to see a strong bipartisan vote over in the House Judiciary Committee to send Shop Safe to the floor. It will encourage electronic commerce providers to adopt anti-counterfeiting best practices in exchange for a safe harbor from contributory liability for trademark infringement. That bill will increase transparency, keep counterfeit goods with a health and safety impact out of consumer hands, and I think promote the health and safety of our country and continue to accelerate the growth of these innovative sales platforms. There's also an urgent need to provide transparency to consumers. That's why I'm also proud to support the Informed Consumers Act. As Mr. Dugan made clear, there's a great need for greater transparency. So I think Shop Safe and Inform complement each other to significantly increase transparency and accountability. And I urge my colleagues to support both of these important bills. Let me turn to some quick questions if I could. Mr. Muderich, my daughter's a satisfied customer, really loves putty and slime and so forth, and had commented on just how inventive your products are. But I'm struck by your descriptions about how hard it has been to enforce your trademark and how much time you've had to dedicate to it. Could you just briefly give us a little more detail? How many other competitors, how many other small business owners like you have had to dedicate enormous amount of resources to the whack-a-mole game of notice and takedown, notice and takedown, notice and takedown with online platforms?
So we go to trade shows, at least pre-pandemic, and so us owners sit around and we talk, and the toy industry in particular is a sort of started my life with something else, invented something, and landed here. And imitation is the finest form of flattery, and I think many of us are very, very flattered. I think if we have a successful product, you are going to see these outright knockoffs, counterfeiters, coming into the marketplace.
And you described how magnetic putty that has much lower safety standards poses a real threat to children and infants in particular. What would it mean to you and other small business owners if platforms took more proactive steps to combat counterfeit good sales?
Well, it would reduce, on the one side, the resources we need to spend sort of pounding against a wall, trying to get someone to listen. It also, I think, would help our brand integrity. It would help consumer confidence, and we would probably receive more of the legitimate sales of the product than the sales which are going to illicit product.
Thank you. Mr. Dugan, how will the information that Inform would collect assist in combating the sale of the online sale of stolen goods?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think it will do more to prevent these accounts from even being opened in the first place. You know, it will definitely protect the consumers from these sellers. It will aid law enforcement. It'll enable us to identify the bad actors much quicker, and will prevent the further expansion of the crime. I think right now what's vital right now is that we're in the middle of an epidemic, that we take immediate action to slow this down.
Thank you, Mr. Dugan. Mr. Snowden, some platforms have said they'd like to see affirmative requirements for brand owners in Shop Safe. Why isn't the current duty brand owners have to police their own trademarks, as Mr. Muderich has, enough to encourage them to assist platforms in policing counterfeit goods? And what requirements would platforms like to see of brand owners in the bill?
Well, I think one of the things you're doing in the bill is changing the liability. So a contributory liability is going to put the burden on us and not on them. They have no responsibility in this. It's important that they stay at the table as well. We cannot do this alone. It takes all of us. And we have been proactive for many years working on this particular issue. I mean, when I look at the retail side, eBay has a program for over 10 years working directly with retailers to help identify suspicious products. So this is something we want to do, but we need retailers, we need rights holders to make sure that they are still at the table and they have a responsibility to help us police their products as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I might have one final question. Professor Kamel, just help us understand how this balance works. If you would, describe the whack-a-mole problem experienced by brand owners. And I've heard some argue ShopSafe is a handout to big tech, that it immunizes them from liability they already have in exchange for nothing meaningful. Is that accurate, or is it true that online platforms are not frequently broadly liable for trademark infringement?
Sure. So to the first part of your question about the whack-a-mole approach, this is when, as has been described today, a counterfeit posting is up, a brand owner tries to react to it, and they spend hours searching for these counterfeit postings across multiple e-commerce platforms, and an entire sub-industry has actually sprung up to basically monitor these platforms to the best of their ability, verify with the brand owners, and then submit for notice and takedown. So hence the term whack-a-mole. Once you take down one, another 10 or 20 come up in its place. And the second part of your question, could you please repeat?
About contributory liability and whether this is just a handout to big tech, ShopSafe, that immunizes them from liability they already have in exchange for nothing meaningful. That's been one criticism after the House market.
Sure. So I don't believe that. I think it addresses what I've written about, which is law disruptive technology. So this technology has been wonderful for all of us. Everybody, I'm sure almost everybody in this room uses e-commerce, but there still has to be a balance to it. And we're sort of reaching that tipping point where we've seen all of these strict products liability cases being brought because people who are being injured cannot find the seller of the goods. So to flip that back to the secondary liability, it creates the space where e-commerce platforms do have to proactively do something to prevent the postings from ever coming up. Brand owners still need to be involved to help identify what their trademarks are, but we find a more balanced meeting between them.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to working with all of you to reform this further. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Coons. On the floor, we've started the first of three roll calls. I'm going to go make the first one, and Senator Blumenthal is going to preside after I recognize Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Kamel, I want to come to you, if I may. Section 230. I know that some online sellers have used Section 230 as a shield to prevent them from liability, and I come from Tennessee. And of course, we have aftermarket auto parts that copyrights have been infringed. We have things like Gibson guitars that have been infringed, and not to mention books that have been published, music. But, you know, when you talk about the auto parts, the engines for boats and motorsports, things of that nature, what's sometimes we've seen in these cases where online sellers really try to hide behind Section 230. So do you see that specific part of the law as something that is a potential obstacle to consumers who are trying to get recourse for having bought something that's a fraudulent product?
I'm very aware of Section 230. It's not an area that I've spent a significant amount of time researching, but I do know that the sellers of counterfeit goods will try to hide behind almost anything they possibly can.
Why don't you take a look at that and then weigh back in with us. Mr. Muderich, let me come to you. Country of origin labeling. I've heard from so many people that sell online that they think this is a good thing. And also from people who buy online, because specifically they don't want to be buying products from China, because many times they feel like they're an infringed or a knockoff. And certainly in Tennessee with some of our toy, inventors. We have had problems. I'm certain you've met with some of these guys. So talk to me about why that type disclosure and how it can be done so that people get the protection and the knowledge, but their privacy is protected, why it's a good thing.
Sure. I mean, when I was starting a business, I was making putty and selling it out of my home. And when the time came that I felt like I needed some protection of my privacy of my home, I got a P.O. box. But at least there's a way to trace it back, right? And then eventually I got an office. There's ways to communicate to the customer a place to go, especially if there's a legal recourse, while maintaining personal privacy. In terms of country of origin labeling, obviously it's required by law. It's important for consumers. When I look at these products, sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it will be in the online listing, sometimes it won't, and often it is in conflict with whatever the online listing says. It's absolute chaos.
And Mr. Snowden, I want to go back. Senator Klobuchar was asking you about protections, and I think you might want to explain. It sounded in your response that you do not support intellectual property protections for U.S. innovators, and that's a protection to them under law. But when you said you have members that are for disclosure, members that are against disclosure, intellectual property protections are very important to this committee.
And I 100% agree with you. It's important to us as well. What I was referring to with Senator Klobuchar, she was mentioning the self-preferencing part of her bill, and that's the part that I said that I was not going to make a comment on today.
Okay. I think that's, so let's go to the country of origin labeling. Where are your members on that?
Well, the country origin is a challenge for us because sometimes we may not even know, we don't touch the product in some cases. In other cases, let me back up. It's important to recognize that online marketplaces aren't just one company. And I think someone said a moment ago, this is just about big tech. There are small tech online stores as well. And so when we try to track country of origin, a lot of that is tied up with trade agreements. It's also enforced by Border Patrol.
But do you think that everyone in the online marketplace has a responsibility to know what they're selling and what they're bringing to the marketplace?
What they're selling,
Would you
yes.
agree with that?
What they're selling, yes, but the country of origin is
Okay,
very
Mr.
different.
Dugan, you want to weigh in on that?
This is a 50-state problem, Senator. We have a lot of plenty of homegrown thieves and organized retail crime organizations to deal with. Transnational organized retail crime is part of this, but not a major factor as far as we can see right now.
Okay. My time has expired. Ms. Kamel, I'm going to come back to you for a written answer on your comments on law disruptive technology. I think that would be helpful as we look at how we're going to move forward on this issue and protect U.S. innovators and protect a healthy, productive online place that consumers can feel and be certain that they know they're not getting fraudulent, counterfeited products. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Blackburn. I will preside while Senator Durbin is voting and recognize myself. To all the witnesses, thank you for being here today. As the chair of the Commerce Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, I've been focused on the role of the Consumer Product Safety Commission and our consumer product safety laws, particularly in the struggle to get online marketplaces to take seriously their responsibility to recall dangerous items. We have a procedure now to protect people, recall dangerous products, but all too often the online marketplaces feel they have no responsibility to inform consumers or to in any way participate in recalls. Just as one example, in April of 2019, I wrote to Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist about the fact that they were not effectively preventing the sale of recalled products, including rock and play sleepers that have been linked to 32 infant deaths. They have been laggard, slow, inconsistent in taking on responsibilities that other sellers and retailers observe. And I am now considering reforms that should be made that would strengthen the CPSC. One of them is that we need to make sure online marketplaces are covered by the product safety and recall laws. So let me ask the witnesses, all of you, what role you think that the CPSC can have, along with the FTC, in enforcing these laws. And I should just emphasize, we have a lot of good laws. Often they're unenforced. We've spent a lot of time making new laws that are then unenforced. Frustrating? Yes. Dangerous? Yes. We need to focus on enforcement and give the FTC and the CPSC the tools they need to assure that the law is more than just dead letter. So let me go down the panel.
Thank you. I've had conversations with CPSC and shared my information about the products that we have and the infringers that we see. I think that CPSC does an effective job at looking at the ports and bulk shipments that are coming into the United States, but I think they're very challenged, as is the Postal Service, at the single parcels that come through third-party sellers into the United States. It's just a torrent of small envelopes, and it's very hard for them to develop a strategy to interdict them or prevent them from reaching consumers' hands. I don't know. It's sort of outside the scope of my knowledge what we might do about it, but to me, that's where I see a major problem.
Ms. Camel?
The areas that we research focus primarily on trademark counterfeiting and then any overlap with consumer product safety issues. So I think it's important for platforms or anyone who is in the business of providing a space for consumers to purchase product, that whatever laws are in place, they uphold, whether they're brick and mortar or whether they're an online space.
Senator, I think this is something I would like to come and talk to you about more, but I will share that when we are notified of recalls or made aware of recalls, we do pull the product down in most cases where we can, and also we try to inform the consumer. In some cases, when you try to inform the consumer, the product may have been bought 2 or 3 years ago, and the email address, whatever we may have for that particular consumer, we may not have, or they may not be able to be contacted. But that is something that we are working on, and we take it very seriously.
Well, I apologize, Senator. That's beyond my role at CVS Health. And I'm not familiar with some of the laws that you mentioned earlier, but I would assume that we would be in support of any action that helps protect consumers.
Thank you. Let me ask one more question. You know, one of the obstacles to effective accountability currently is Section 230, which in effect creates broad immunity for the platforms. Let me ask you, Ms. Camel, whether you're familiar with the impediments of Section 230 to effective accountability to consumers on the part of the platforms. And I'm an advocate of reforming Section 230. We've managed in certain discrete areas to do it. We are proposing additional measures. Senator Graham and I have a proposal which we've introduced in past Congresses called the Earn It Act. It's bipartisan. It passed unanimously from the Judiciary Committee. Just one example of what we can do to impose greater accountability if we reform Section 230.
Thank you for the question. I'm very aware of Section 230. It's not part of my current research, but I'm happy to provide you with some follow-up afterwards.
That would be great. And anyone else who wants to add any views on Section 230, I'd welcome it. Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here. Mr. Dugan, I just want to start with you, if I could. I noticed something in your testimony that I thought was interesting. You said that much of the problem with counterfeit goods online is due to organized crime in brick stores and brick and mortar stores. and that organized criminals shoplift from those stores, and then they turn around and they sell the goods online. Have I got that right?
No, Senator, I don't think I commented on counterfeit goods.
Well,
Probably stolen goods.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's
Stolen goods. Stolen. I'm sorry, I introduced the word counterfeit. I mean, they're goods online that are stolen, and then they steal them from brick and mortar stores and turn around and sell them online. Have I got that?
Yes, sir.
Is that right? Okay. So the New York Times earlier this year had a story in which you were quoted, I think, as saying our security officers are assaulted on a pretty regular basis in San Francisco, and that San Francisco is one of the epicenters of organized retail crime. Have I got that right?
Yes, sir. You do.
Can you just say more about that? Because I think this is something that has not been widely reported, is not widely understood. That part of the problem that we're seeing in counterfeit, or in this case, stolen goods online. I mean, we've got a deluge of these goods, and it's linked also, it now turns out, to the crime wave that we're also seeing across the country. So maybe say something more about that.
Yes. Thank you for that question, Senator. I will start by saying that this is not a big city crime. That this occurs in all 50 states. Thefts of organized retail crime occur just as much in low-crime suburban neighborhoods as they do in America's largest cities. I know that's probably news to a lot of folks because it's not covered on the media as it is in some of our major cities. So what I meant to say is we were talking about San Francisco specifically. There's a lot of stolen product there that gets filtered to other states, specifically like Texas, North Carolina, and New Jersey. They get a lot of that stolen product from San Francisco. So what I was trying to make a point was, even though the product is stolen in one area, the problem is statewide. That's why we need federal legislation.
Right. So in other words, it can be stolen from one place, San Francisco, New York, St. Louis, whatever, wherever, and but then it finds its way online. I mean, so it shows up in online marketplaces in some contexts, and it's competing with legitimate goods with goods that are entirely legal online, and you've got competition that's making its way into these online marketplaces that's due to organized crime at the brick and mortar level. Is that fair to say? Have I got that right?
And that is fair to say, except I would add it's unfair competition.
Right, yeah, exactly.
They're getting the products for much cheaper. But that's what our team does. We track these investigations state to state, all across the country, and then ultimately it leads us to the same place, which is an online marketplace, which is why we're looking for your help today.
And what do you think is the best way for this body to address that phenomenon?
I think the swift passage of the Inform Act is a vital first step.
Very good. Thank you for that. I want to turn to the Amazon self-preferencing question here for a moment. Mr. Mutrick, I think that you testified to Senator Klobuchar earlier that your product in particular, that Amazon for a while had an Amazon Basics knockoff of your product. Have I got that right?
That's correct.
It's now been taken down.
It was taken down only because it, I'll say, accidentally infringed on some of our registered trademarks.
I see. So I just want to highlight this problem because I think it's so central. Last year, the Wall Street Journal reported that Amazon collects detailed data about merchandise, so Amazon can create copycat products. They did that with your product, it sounds like. The Wall Street Journal report said this was standard operating procedure. Amazon denied that. They said they had procedures in place banning the practice. Now, has that been your experience, Mr. Mutrick?
I do not have any insight into how Amazon makes their decisions, but I was aware that the 4-pack that they created, or 6-pack that they created, bore a striking resemblance to another unique item that we had on Amazon.
Well, it doesn't seem that you're the only one. Employees in the same report said that the procedures that Amazon referenced weren't enforced. And in fact, Amazon encouraged employees to break those procedures. And then last month, Reuters reported that Amazon's own internal documents reveal it's still doing the same thing. The markup has reported evidence that Amazon is systematically rigging its search engine to return results for its copycat products over producers like you, Mr. Mutrick. And I just want to drive home the point that we can talk all day about the problems of counterfeit goods, and those are significant, but that's not going to make a huge dent, I don't think, unless we do something about the self-preferencing on these platforms. I've introduced legislation that would prohibit this self-preferencing. I've joined legislation by Senator Klobuchar and Senator Grassley that heads in the same direction, and I just want to underline that I think that is absolutely vital that we tackle this issue. Last thing, Mr. Mutrick, in my few remaining seconds here, Senator Blackburn was asking about some of the country of origin issues, and I want to just highlight this. Your product, tell us about the problem of counterfeiters using high-strength magnets in some of the knockoffs of your product. And I think that these were not goods that were not made in the United States of America. Is that right?
That's right. These samples I have here, which I ordered last week, were not made in the United States. Some of them do have producer markings. This one says made in China. This one says nothing at all. And they do contain these high-strength magnets, which cause significant hazard to children when they're playing with this product.
Absolutely. And I just want to underline that we're talking a lot right now about supply chain and manufacturing issues, which is absolutely important given our supply chain crisis. But I think what we're also seeing in this context is that when giant companies like Amazon help hawk foreign counterfeits, these are counterfeits, they're made abroad, parents don't usually have any way of knowing this, it's very difficult to find out. They're not only endangering children, they're also taking jobs away from people like you and your company that are made here in this country, and putting American kids at risk, as well as our own economy. So we need to find ways to push back against this simultaneous problem of counterfeiting, of misrepresentation of goods, and also, frankly, offshoring. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. And now Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the panelists. Mr. Dugan, you mentioned that you think that the Inform Act should be passed as quickly as possible. My understanding is that the House version of this act changed the date when the consumer receives information about the product to after the point of sale. Do you support that change?
I support both the House legislation and the companion here in the Senate. I'm not an expert or legislators. I'm going to kind of leave that to the legislators if I could.
Doesn't
but
it
I
make
do
more sense
support
to get
that.
the information to the consumer
Yes.
before the consumer purchases the
Yes,
item?
I support that, yes.
So since Mr. Dugan supports the passage of the Inform Act, do the other panelists also support the passage of this act? Please.
Senator, we have not weighed in with official support. Right now, we're still want to work with the committee to fine tune some things in the bill, particularly the verification timelines and thresholds, which are very important.
But it sounds as though you support the concept of disclosure information.
Correct. And inform.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mudarek? You have brought to the attention of these online sellers, about maybe Amazon, that they have online unsafe products and they don't take it down. You've been asked a number of questions relating to Section 230. And I'm wondering where the online platform receives money for advertising the product, whether they should be exposed to liability. What do you think? Any of you?
I'm not sure if I fully understand your question, Senator. Can you?
Right now, Section 230 pretty much protects the online marketplace of Google and, Amazon. Let's just use Amazon. That whatever is the content, that they have no responsibility for monitoring or doing anything, disclosing anything. So I am co-sponsor of, the Safe Tech Act, which requires that in certain instances, these platforms will not have the benefit of liability protection. One of the instances would be if they actually receive money for that item to be advertised on their platforms.
Well, Section 230 allows us to actually take down the content. That's why it's so vital that we have that liability protection. So anything that would harm or dilute that protection would be a concern of ours.
Well, except that if the platform does not take down this product, as was the case with Mr. Buberek, then shouldn't there be some liability attaching?
Well,
because right now there's nothing that really requires these platforms to take those kinds of precautions. If they want to, they can. If they don't, they still get the liability protection.
Actually, ma'am, there's law now that says if we're notified of something, we have to take it down, and that is required, and so we do that. Now, Mr. Mudarek, I don't know all of his examples, and I'm not familiar with everything. It's the first time I'm hearing about it, so I can't comment on exactly what he's saying. But I can tell you that there is existing law that says if we're notified about something, we must take it down.
Oh, that is surprising because this committee has had other hearings where certain video, for example, it's very harmful, very, the platform is asked to take down a video, for example, a father whose daughter was shot and killed online. The video, so he kept asking the platform to take down the video, and they never took it down.
Well,
So I don't understand your
in the-
comment that if
well, in the
you
example that
requested,
Mr.
you have to take something down.
In the example Mr. Murick said was there were products that were infringing on his trademarks. And in those cases, that information, once we're notified of that, there's precedence there, there's law there that says we have to take it down. That's notice and comment.
If I may,
Yes.
on a monthly basis, we would send in lists of product which did not infringe our marks, but were obviously in violation of federal safety standards. And on a monthly basis, we would follow up with the same list of not only the same products, but even in many cases, the same exact listing that had not been taken down.
So I am among the members of this committee who are looking at the Section 230 immunity provisions to make some changes. I realize that every time we do that, I mean, there might be unintended consequences. So the bill that I mentioned, Safe Tech Act, seeks to really define those instances when that immunity is not available. So I'm going to continue to pursue it. I would ask the panelists to take a look at the Safe Tech Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dugan,
Sorry, I don't understand your...
over the last several years, we've seen repeated efforts in Democrat-controlled cities and states to effectively decriminalize theft. California, for example, said that any theft under $950 is no longer a felony, and we won't arrest you if you're under that dollar figure. A recent NBC News article stated that both CVS and Walgreens say shoplifting in San Francisco outpaces thefts at their stores across the country. Pretty common sense. If you remove or greatly reduce the penalty for stealing things, theft gets worse. What exactly are the figures for non-employee theft in CVS stores around the country? And in particular, how do the rates of theft differ in jurisdictions with so-called progressive prosecutors who decline to prosecute shoplifting versus jurisdictions where law enforcement is enforcing laws against theft?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to disclose CVS financial information about losses. But if you allow me to comment, this is not a big city problem, right? Decriminalization is contributing to the problem. You're right, sir.
Is there more theft in San Francisco than elsewhere?
No, sir.
There's not.
Not relative to the amount of stores and market share that we have. It's higher. But
so NBC News was wrong when they said that.
I can only speak to what I see every day on the ground, Senator, and I follow these criminals day to day from state to state and city to city.
So CVS would support other jurisdictions legalizing shoplifting up to $950?
CVS does not support legalizing shoplifting.
Why not?
Senator.
Why not?
We're not going to endorse criminal activity.
But you're saying it has no effect.
I never said it had no effect.
You said there's not worse shoplifting in San Francisco. I find that highly dubious.
No effect, Senator.
Does it have an effect or not?
Yes, of course it does.
What's the effect?
The effect is shoplifting is completely different than organized retail crime. If you're talking about shoplifting, that's a whole different dynamic than organized retail crime.
And so my question is, what's the effect? You guys have the data.
I'm sure I understand your question, Senator. Is there an effect? Do we take losses to shoplifting? Yes, like every other retailer.
And are they greater in jurisdictions that effectively legalize it?
No, they're not.
So then why would you oppose every jurisdiction legalizing shoplifting? Your questions are not, your answer is not making any sense, sir.
Well, I respectfully disagree. I think it's making perfect sense. What I'm saying, Senator, is this crime goes to all 50 states. It's not a big city problem. Absolutely not.
So why would you oppose every jurisdiction legalizing shoplifting? Sir, why would you oppose every jurisdiction legalizing shoplifting?
We're not going to. Why are we not going to oppose
why
legalizing shoplifting?
Yes.
No, we're not going to do that, Senator. We're not going to endorse criminal activity. But shoplifting is a different dynamic than organized retail crime. And what I'm here to testify about today is that organized retail crime affects every city,
that's really quite
including the
remarkable.
major cities in Texas.
That's really quite remarkable. Let me ask a different question, which is you go into great detail about organized criminal organizations, but I want to point to you to something in Ms. Campbell's testimony, where she cites the work of J.P. Kennedy, who's written a lot on the subject of theft. And one scholarly article that Mr. Kennedy wrote, Functional Redundancy in Response to Employee Theft Within Small Businesses, has an interesting paragraph on the second page which is relevant to this discussion. It says, quote, "It has been estimated that employee theft within the United States is 10 times more costly than all forms of traditional street crime, and that it cost victimized businesses in the U.S. economy as much as $400 billion a year. Furthermore, employee theft is estimated to cost victimized businesses significantly more than non-employee theft within the same businesses." In your experience, what is the relative magnitude of employee theft versus non-employee theft for retailers?
My scope at CBS, Senator, is to investigate the external part of the theft. I don't have the internal figures necessarily at CBS. I will say overall, as a president of the Coalition of Law Enforcement and Retail, that internal theft is down. I could certainly provide you a report with those figures attached to it, Senator, if you'd like me to. But
do you have any judgment as to which is bigger, employee theft or non-employee theft?
Well, I might be a biased opinion there, Senator, because I'm in the street every day working on organized retail crime. I see the harm that it does every day, why we need this federal legislation. So I see it.
Sir, with all respect, I'd like you to answer my question. Do you have any judgment as to which is bigger, employee theft or non-employee theft? And in particular, Mr. Kennedy says employee theft is 10 times larger.
No, I would disagree with that assessment.
Do you have any judgment as to which is bigger, employee theft or non-employee theft?
Most recently, over the spread of this epidemic, I would say non-employee theft.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to thank the witnesses for coming in today and testifying. It was an interesting panel and drew a large part of our membership here on the Senate Judiciary Committee. We have committee jurisdiction issues, which suggests that the Senate Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over this issue. We have jurisdiction over Senator Coons' aspects of it. That's ours to worry about. But the problem is real, and we now have all the major players on board, apparently, to are doing something about it. And I'm going to do my best, though it won't go through this committee, to encourage the Commerce Committee to join with us in this effort. So I thank you for lending your voices to it. It's been 13 years for me since I first saw those Home Depot drills and realized what was going on out there. That's a long time to wait for an answer. Maybe not by Senate standards, but by normal human standards. So thank you for joining us today. And with that, the Senate Judiciary Committee stands adjourned.
Thanks for watching. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.